Caleb Brant ordered a wife the way he ordered seed and nails, by letter, with a list of what the homestead needed. He asked for a woman who could keep books, mend a shirt, and not run home to her mother at the first hard winter. The letters that came back were written in a fine, even hand, full of clear sentences about ledgers and bread and the price of laying hens in Ohio. They did not mention that the woman who would step off the train could not see his face or the cabin or the 80 acres of frost-bitten Wyoming sod she had agreed to call home. Her name was Eleanor Hartwell, and she was 26 years old, and she had been blind since a fever took her sight at the age of 9. In Cincinnati, she had learned to read a book of raised dots with her fingertips, to pour tea without spilling a drop, to cross a known room at a steady walk and never once reach for a wall. Her younger sister, Margaret, had taken her dictation, copying every careful word onto paper, and not once in 11 letters had either of them set down the one fact a man 1,000 miles away had a right to know. It was Margaret who first read the advertisement aloud on a gray March afternoon, the two of them at the kitchen table while rain ran down the glass. "Wyoming homesteader," she read, "wants a steady wife, no flighty girls. Write to Caleb Brant, Sweetwater County." She laughed and meant to turn the page. "Read it again," Eleanor said. "Ellie, he wants a woman to run a farm." "I can run a farm. I run this house." "You cannot run it from behind closed eyes on the far side of the country, where there is no one to fetch you if you fall." Eleanor set down her cup exactly on the saucer, without a sound. "I am 26, and our father is dead, and his cousin has made it plain there is no room here for a spinster. He must lead by the elbow. I would rather be wanted for my hands in Wyoming than tolerated for my helplessness in Ohio." She turned her face toward her sister, and her gray eyes, clear as river water and aimed an inch wide of Margaret's own, did not waver. "Write the letter, say I keep books, say I bake, do not say the rest." So Margaret wrote, and the answers came, and a marriage was made of paper. Caleb Brant sent $30 for a ticket and a tintype of himself, a square-shouldered man of 34 with a dark beard and a steady, unsmiling mouth, which Margaret described to her aloud 100 times before she left, until Eleanor felt she knew the shape of a face she would never truly see, and which she carried in her lap on the long ride west and could not read. The train came into the Cheyenne depot late on the last day of April in a roar of brakes and steam and 100 strangers' voices. Eleanor came down the iron steps with her gloved hand light on the rail, her chin level, her cobalt dress brushed clean of cinders, and she stood still on the boards of the platform and let the world tell her where she was. Hot iron, ticking as it cooled, pine smoke, horses, a man's boots coming to a halt 3 feet in front of her and stopping there, uncertain. "You'd be Eleanor," he said. The voice was lower than Margaret had guessed, and tired. "I'm Caleb. Train treat you all right?" "It did, Mr. Brant," she said, and put out her hand toward the sound of him an inch too high, so that he had to reach up to take it. He took it. His hand was a working man's hand, hard across the palm, careful. He held hers a moment, and then, because she had not moved to gather a bag or look about for her trunk, because her eyes were aimed somewhere over his right shoulder at nothing, he leaned to one side, and her gaze did not follow him. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you looking at me?" "I am looking toward you," Eleanor said. Her chin came up another fraction. I cannot do better than that, Mr. Brant. I have been blind since I was 9 years old. The letters did not say so. That was my choosing, and I will not pretend it was kind. For a long moment there was nothing but the depot around them, a porter calling a name down the line. Caleb Brant let go of her hand as if it had grown hot. "You can't see?" he said. "No. You wrote me 11 letters, and you let me pay your fare, and you got on a train across half the country, and you can't see. My sister wrote the words. The thoughts were mine, and every one of them was true, but the silence." Eleanor stood her ground on the swaying platform, though her heart slammed at her ribs, and she could not tell from his voice whether the next thing she heard would be a curse or his boots turning away down the boards. "I keep books by a system of raised marks. I bake by smell and by touch, and I have never once burned a loaf. I asked for honest work, and I meant it. But I owed you the truth before the preacher, not after, and I have given it to you a year too late and 10 minutes too soon. If you want to put me back on the train, I will go, and you will not hear me weep." She heard him breathe out, long and slow. She heard him take off his hat and turn it in his hands, the brim crackling. "It's near dark," he said at last, in the flat voice of a man choosing the smallest decision because the large one is too big to lift. "Town's no place to settle this. We'll drive out. You'll have my mother's room tonight, and we'll talk it plain in the morning when I can think." A pause. "Where's your trunk?" "The blue one, with the rope on the handle." He found it himself. He did not offer her his arm, and she did not ask for it. She walked beside his footsteps with her cane folding the dark ahead of her, across the rutted yard to the wagon, and when she reached up for the seat, her hand found the wheel first, and the iron rim was cold, and that was how she knew she had come a long way from home. They drove 2 hours under a sky she would never see, and he said nothing, and she counted the turns and the creek crossings under the wheels, filing each away, so that even friendless she would know the road back to the train if it came to that. The cabin, when they reached it, smelled of cold ash and dust and a man's long solitude. He lit a lamp out of habit, and then looked at it and put it out again, and the small uselessness of the flame, struck for a guest who could not use it, was the first thing that made his anger waver. In the morning he meant to send her back. He had decided it in the night, lying stiff and sleepless, and the decision had felt like the only sane one a man could make. A blind wife on a homestead was a danger to herself and a burden on him, and no court and no neighbor would blame him for putting a deception on the eastbound train. Then he came in from milking, and the cabin was warm, and there was coffee, and the table that had stood under a film of grease and grit since his mother died was scrubbed pale and clean. Eleanor stood at the stove, with her sleeves pushed up and her hands moving over a skillet she could not see, turning something by the sound and smell of it, and when he stopped in the doorway she said, without turning, "2 more steps and you'll knock the chair. I moved it to the wall so we'd both know where it lives." "You found the coffee," he said stupidly. "I found everything." She set a plate down, dead center of the place she had laid for him. "A kitchen tells you where it keeps its things if you let it. The flour was high and to the right because you are tall and reach for it without thinking. The salt was by the stove. I have walked this room 40 times since the light I could not use came up. I know it better than you do now, Mr. Brant, and that is not a boast. It is the only way I have ever been able to live in a place. I learn it until it cannot surprise me." She paused, and her voice lost a little of its starch. Eat before it's cold, then say your piece. I have my bag packed by the door." He ate. The eggs were not burned. The biscuits were light, and there were exactly two, because in one night and one morning she had already learned by ear that he took two and no more. He looked at the clean table and the woman at the stove with her clouded eyes aimed at the wall, and the speech he had built in the night came apart in his hands. "I won't lie to you the way you lied to me," he said. "I don't know how this works. A homestead in winter has killed seeing men who were born to it. I can't be watching you every minute I'm in the south field." "Then don't watch me," Eleanor said. "Teach me the place. Walk me the yard once, the well, the barn, the woodpile, the privy, the edge of the bluff. String me a rope from the door to the barn for the days the weather comes down, as they do in Norway, my mother's people, where the snow can blind a man who sees as well as one who doesn't. After that, I will not need watching. I have never in my life needed watching twice." It was the rope that decided him, though he could not have said so. The plain sense of it, asked for plainly, with no tears and no promises, she could not keep. A foolish woman would have sworn she would manage. This one had asked for a rope. "Stay through the threshing, then," he said. "We'll see by snow." So she stayed, and the homestead learned her as she learned it. He walked her the yard that first week, gruff and brief, and she counted her paces from the door, 41 to the well, 62 to the barn, 104 to the woodpile. She tied knots of different shapes in the guide rope at the turnings so her hand would read the corners. She found the hen house by the noise of it, and the eggs by feel, warm in the straw, and never once crushed a single one. She kept his books in a ledger of her own devising, dots pressed into the margin with a stylus, so that when the cattle buyer came in autumn and tried to short him $40, it was Eleanor who said quietly, "You bought from us in June, sir. 11 head at the price we set. Your own man wrote the figure, and I have it here," and ran her fingers down a page he could not read and named the sum to the dollar, and the buyer paid. And Caleb stared at his wife and understood all at once that he had married a tool he had been treating as an ornament. The neighbors came to look at her as neighbors do. The Pruitt women drove 3 miles to bring a pie and a stare, and old Mrs. Pruitt said, "Not quite low enough. Caleb Brant sent clear to Ohio for a wife, and they sent him a blind one. I call that a swindle." Eleanor poured the tea, 4 cups, each one filled to the same level by the weight of the pot in her hand, and set the last one before Mrs. Pruitt without a tremor. "It would be a swindle, ma'am," she said pleasantly, "if I could not pour your tea. Sugar is by your right hand. Mind the spoon." She turned her clouded eyes a half-inch off the older woman's face and held them there. "And you needn't lower your voice on my account. I lost my eyes, Mrs. Pruitt, not my ears. Folks have always been braver about me at a distance than they are across a table." There was a small, brittle silence over the teacups. The Pruitt women left earlier than they had meant to, and they did not bring up the swindle again. What Caleb noticed through that long gold autumn was not her tricks. It was the quiet. He had married for ledgers and bread, and he had got those. He had not known how loud his solitude had been until a voice answered it across the dark of the cabin at night, asking had he eaten, telling him the wind had shifted north and they should bring the young stock down. He had not known he was lonely until he stopped being lonely, and the not knowing left him slow to name the warmth that had banked itself in every cold corner of the house. One evening in November, he came in chilled to the bone and found she had hung his other coat by the stove to warm and put a hot stone wrapped in flannel under his side of the bench, and he stood holding the warm coat and could not for the life of him say a word. She heard the stillness and read it. "You're staring," she said gently. "I can hear it. You go very quiet when you stare." "How do you always know?" he said. It came out rough. "You breathe different when you're looking at a thing you can't make sense of. Slow, through your nose." A faint smile touched her mouth. "I have only ever had the sounds of people, Mr. Brant. I have spent 17 years learning to read them, because they are all I am given. You are not a hard book." "Caleb," he said, "I think you can leave off the mister." The first snow came soft and early, and the second harder, and on the 8th day of December the sky in the north went the color of a fresh bruise, and Caleb stood in the yard and read it with his whole body. The same close attention his wife gave a strange room and did not like what it said. He brought every head of stock into the home pasture and the barn. He split a week of wood. He filled the water and checked the rope from door to barn, and Eleanor heard him doing it and knew with the certainty her ears had never failed her that something was coming that frightened a man not easily frightened. "How bad?" she said. "Bad. It'll come tonight, and it'll come hard, and there's a heifer due to calve that won't wait for fair weather." He looked at the bruised sky. "If it's what I think, the wind'll take the world out from under us by midnight. We keep the fire, and we keep close, and we don't go out for anything but the barn, and only on the rope." It came at 9, all at once, a white roar out of the north that struck the cabin one flat blow and did not let up. The wind found every chink and screamed in it. Snow drove sideways and packed against the glass, and the lamp guttered in the draught. And for the first time Caleb Brant understood, sitting in his own house, what his wife had lived inside of every day since the fever. The blizzard had taken his eyes. Out there in that white, howling dark, sight bought a man nothing at all, and left him worse off than his wife, because he had never once had to learn to do without it. Near midnight, the heifer's bawling came thin under the wind, and Caleb pulled on his coat. "She's down, and it's comin' wrong. I can hear it. If I don't pull that calf, we lose them both, and we can't spare them." He cracked the door, and the cold drove in and knifed the breath from them, and the lamp died. "Bar this behind me. I'll keep the rope." "Caleb." Eleanor was at his elbow, already wrapped, her cane in her hand. "You cannot do it alone in the dark. A breech calf needs two, and you know it. You'll be working blind with your hands full and no light. And the one thing in this house that has spent her whole life working blind with her hands full and no light is standing beside you. Take me to the barn, on the rope. I will not let go of it, and I will not let go of you." He looked at her, and there was no time, and she was right, and the knowing of it rolled over in his chest and left a clean ache behind. "Hand on the rope," he said. "Hand on my belt. If you fall, you yell, and we both stop." They went out into the roar together. The cold was a living thing that wanted them dead. The rope was a line of fire in their fists, and the snow erased the world a foot past their faces. And Caleb, who had walked this path 10,000 times, lost it inside of 20 steps. He could not tell up from down in the white. He stopped, lungs burning, and for one swallowing moment The panic of the truly lost rose in his throat, the panic that kills men 40 feet from their own doors. And in that moment, his wife's voice came steady at his shoulder, into his ear, under the scream of the wind. "You've gone 3 knots along the rope. The barn is 2 more, and then the post. Don't look. Looking is no use to either of us now. Count with your hand. Feel the knot. That's the turn by the stump. The ground falls off to your left. Lean right." Her fingers found the rope ahead of his and read it like a page. There, smell it, the barn, the stock, were at the door. He had not smelled it. He had seen nothing, known nothing, and his wife had walked him home through the white death on 17 years of practice at being lost and finding the way, regardless. They fell through the door into the dark and the steaming heat of the beasts, and she did not stop. "Light's no use to me. Tell me where she is." He told her. The heifer was down in the straw, heaving, the calf hung up half-born and wrong. There was no lighting a lamp in that wind, and the barn held a total, swallowing dark. Caleb worked by feel at the calf's hindquarters and could not find the second leg, and his hands were going numb, and Eleanor knelt in the straw in her good cobalt dress with the storm shaking the roof, and put her hands in beside his without flinching, fine, quick hands that had read whole libraries no eye would ever see, and felt what he could not. "The legs turned back under. Here, feel where I am. We cup the hoof so it doesn't tear her, and we bring it round on the next pane. Together. Slow." Her voice never rose and never shook. "Wait for her. Now, bring it round. Gentle. There it comes." The calf came in a rush of straw and steam, slick and still, and Eleanor cleared its nose with her fingers and rubbed its ribs hard, rough and steady, willing the small body into living, and after a terrible long breath of nothing, the calf coughed and shuddered and bawled, and the heifer turned her great head to lick it, and Caleb Brant knelt in the dark of his own barn with his blind wife's shoulder warm against his, and found that his face was wet, and was glad past speaking that she could not see it, and knew with sudden certainty that she could hear it, and did not care. "We did it," he said. "You did it," said Eleanor. "I only saw in the dark. I have always been able to do that." They stayed in the barn till the worst of it passed, banked in straw against the calf for the warmth, and somewhere in the small hours, with the storm at last beginning to tire above them, Caleb Brant took his wife's cold hand and held it as he had not held it since the platform. "I meant to send you back," he said, "that first morning. I had it all said in my head." "I know," she said. "You had your bag packed by your eyes, the way I had mine by the door. We were both ready to give up the thing we wanted because we were afraid of it." "I'm not afraid of it now." His thumb moved over her knuckles, learning them. "Eleanor, I have wronged you in my heart all these months, counting what you couldn't do. I never once counted what you could, till tonight you walked me home through a white death I'd have died in alone. I don't want a wife who keeps my books. I've got that, and it's the least of you." He swallowed. "I want the woman who asked me for a rope instead of pity. Will you stay? Not through the threshing, for good, as I should have asked you under that preacher I never took you to." For the first time since Cincinnati, Eleanor Hartwell wept where a man could hear her, and was not ashamed. "I will stay," she said. "I came 1,000 miles on a lie because I would rather be useful than safe. I think I am ready now to be loved instead, if you can learn it. You will have to tell me your face in words, Caleb Brant, for I will never see it. but I have read you in the dark since I stepped off that train, and I know the shape of you better than your mirror does." They were married a second time, properly, in the white clapboard church in town, when the roads cleared in spring, and the same Mrs. Pruitt, who had called it a swindle, wept into her handkerchief in the second pew. Eleanor wore the cobalt dress, and her hand rested light on Caleb's arm, and when the preacher said he might kiss his bride, she found his face first with her fingertips, reading it unhurried, the rough beard and the warm, scarred cheek, and the mouth that she had taught at last to smile before she rose on her toes to meet it. The calf that came into the world in that black barn, pulled living from the dark by 4 blind hands, grew into the best heifer on the place, and Caleb named her Margaret, after the sister who had written all the letters, and Eleanor laughed whenever the name was called across the yard. The guide ropes stayed strung winter and summer, and the neighbor children thought them a marvel, and Eleanor would walk them with her hand reading the knots, and tell the little ones that there was more than one way to find your way home, and that the surest way was not always with your eyes. If this story stayed with you, tell me one thing in the comments. Have you ever been completely certain about a person in the first cold minute, only for them to prove you wrong by the first hard winter? And if you would like another story about 2 strangers who came together on a lie and stayed for the truth, it's right here.